The Nevada sun hammered down on forward operating base Sentinel like a forge, turning every metal surface into a branding iron. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb squinted through the heat shimmer at the makeshift firing range, watching another $1 million targeting system fail to lock onto the reinforced bunker mock-ups that dotted the desert landscape. The brass from CENTCOM stood in the shade of a camouflage canopy, their uniforms crisp despite the 112-degree heat, clipboards in hand and disappointment etched across their faces. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow with a dust-caked sleeve. At 34, he was old for his rank, passed over for promotion 3 times. Not because he lacked skill, but because he had a reputation. The kind of reputation that made colonels nervous and captains roll their eyes. He was the guy who questioned doctrine, the sergeant who built things in his spare time, the soldier who insisted there were better ways to do things if people would just listen. 3 years ago, he had started sketching designs in a worn notebook during his downtime. The idea came to him during a deployment in Afghanistan, watching a howitzer crew struggle with digital rangefinders that constantly malfunctioned in the dust and heat. What if there was a purely mechanical backup system? Something analog, reliable, impossible to jam or hack. Something a gunner could use when all the fancy electronics failed? He called it the Wagon rangefinder. The name came from its appearance. A circular calculating device with radiating spokes, each calibrated for different munition types and trajectories. It looked like something from World War II, and that was exactly the point. No batteries, no GPS, no computer chips, just precision engineering, mathematical principles that had worked for centuries, and a design so simple a private fresh out of basic could learn it in an afternoon. Marcus had built the first prototype in his garage during leave, using scrap metal from a junkyard and bearings from an old bicycle. It worked. God, did it work? He had tested it against his own calculations, then against the Army's digital systems. The wagon wheel was faster for quick ranging, more reliable in adverse conditions, and cost about $300 in materials compared to the $80,000 digital units. He had submitted his design up the chain of command with the enthusiasm of a man who genuinely believed he had created something valuable. The response had been underwhelming. His immediate superior, Captain Raymond Hodge, had barely glanced at the blueprints before dismissing them. "You think you are smarter than the engineers at Lockheed Martin, Webb?" Captain Hodge had said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is the United States Army, not a high school science fair. We use cutting-edge technology, not circus wheels." The design had died there, filed away, forgotten. Marcus became known as the sergeant with crazy ideas. The guy who wasted time on junk instead of focusing on his career. Other NCOs would joke about it in the mess hall. Webb and his wagon wheel. Maybe next he will invent a telegraph machine for us. But Marcus kept his prototype. Kept it oiled and calibrated. Used it privately during range training when no one was watching. And it kept working, kept proving itself, even if only to him. Now, standing in the Nevada heat watching the Army's latest targeting system demonstrate its limitations, Marcus felt that familiar frustration building in his chest. The demonstration was supposed to showcase rapid bunker elimination capabilities. 6 reinforced concrete bunkers had been constructed at various ranges and elevations across the test field. The goal was to destroy all 6 in under 10 minutes using the new integrated fire control system, a marvel of modern technology that cost the taxpayers $42 million to develop. So far, they had managed to hit 2 bunkers in 18 minutes. The system kept losing target lock. Recalibration took forever. The touch screens glitched in the direct sunlight. One of the techs was on his 3rd reboot. Colonel Patricia Vance, the stern-faced officer overseeing the demonstration, checked her watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. Her jaw was tight. This was supposed to be a triumph, proof of concept before rolling out the system to combat units overseas. Instead, it was becoming an embarrassment. Senators were supposed to visit next week. Funding for the next fiscal year hung in the balance. Marcus felt the weight of his prototype in his pack. He had brought it. He always brought it the way some soldiers carried lucky coins or photos from home. A talisman of his stubbornness, maybe, or his hope that someday someone would actually listen. The digital system failed again. A lieutenant swore loudly enough for the colonels to hear. One of the civilian contractors was on the phone, probably calling for technical support. This was going to be a long day. Captain Hodge materialized beside Marcus like a bad omen. His presence announced by the crunch of boots on gravel and the distinctive smell of his cologne mixing poorly with desert heat. The captain had gained weight since their last posting together, his uniform straining at the buttons, but his eyes retained that same calculating coldness Marcus remembered. Well, if it isn't Sergeant Webb, the great inventor. Hodge's voice carried just loud enough for the nearby soldiers to hear. Still carrying that garage project of yours around? What is it again? Your little will thingy? Marcus kept his eyes forward, jaw clenched. Just observing the demonstration, sir. Of course you are. Hodge stepped closer, lowering his voice to something more venomous. You know what your problem is, Webb? You think being clever makes you special. You think because you can weld some scrap metal together, you understand warfare better than people with actual educations. PhDs. Engineers who went to MIT and Stanford. The digital system beeped plaintively in the background. Another error code flashing across its display. Hodge ignored it. You embarrassed me 3 years ago, bringing that ridiculous contraption to my attention. Made me look like a fool for even forwarding it up the chain. Do you know what Colonel Brewster said? He asked if I was running a daycare for soldiers with delusions of grandeur. Marcus finally turned to face him. It works, sir. That ridiculous contraption works. In your garage. Maybe. Hodge's smile was thin and sharp. But this is the real military, Webb. We have protocols, standards, procurement processes that exist for good reasons. We cannot just slap together some hillbilly engineering project and pretend it is battlefield ready. A shout came from the firing line. The system had locked up completely now. One of the contractors was arguing with a major about reset procedures. Colonel Vance looked like she wanted to court-martial everyone present. Hodge glanced back at the chaos, then returned his attention to Marcus. And wiped that smug look off your face. Whatever you are thinking, forget it. You are here as a grunt, nothing more. Your job is to follow orders and keep your mouth shut about your little hobby projects. Am I clear? Crystal, sir. Good. Hodge started to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Webb? I saw your name on the promotion board review list again. Third time is the charm, they say. But between you and me, after I submit my evaluation, there will not be a fourth time. The Army needs team players, not mavericks who think they are smarter than the system. He left Marcus standing there, the sun beating down mercilessly, watching $42 million of cutting-edge technology continue its very public failure while his $300 prototype sat silent in his pack. The humiliation was not just being ignored anymore. It was being actively suppressed, punished for daring to think differently. Colonel Vance slammed her hand on the equipment table hard enough to make the civilians jump. That is it. Shut it down. This demonstration is over. Ma'am, we just need another 20 minutes to, the lead contractor began. I said shut it down. Her voice cut through the desert air like a blade. I am not going to stand here watching this disaster for another second. We have senators arriving in 6 days expecting to see functional technology. And what do I have? A $70 million paperweight that cannot hit stationary targets in ideal conditions. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Vance turned to her officers, her face flushed with anger and something else. Desperation, maybe. If anyone here has any ideas, any alternatives, now would be the time to speak up. Because as it stands, this program is dead, and a lot of careers are going down with it. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it. The moment he had imagined 1,000 times, played out in his head during countless sleepless nights. He could stay quiet, keep his head down, let the opportunity pass like all the others. Or he could step forward into the line of fire. He stepped forward. Colonel, ma'am. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb. I might have something. Every head turned toward him. He saw Hodge's face go pale, then red. Saw the mixture of curiosity and skepticism in Vance's eyes. Felt the weight of dozens of gazes, some curious, most dismissive. This better be good, Sergeant. Vance's tone was ice. Marcus unslung his pack, pulled out the wagon wheel rangefinder, and held it up. The sunlight caught the polished brass of its calculation rings, making it gleam. It looked simultaneously ancient and beautiful, like something pulled from a museum. "What the hell is that?" someone muttered. "It is a mechanical rangefinder, ma'am. Analog, fully functional, immune to electronic warfare or environmental interference. I designed it 3 years ago. It can range and calculate firing solutions faster than the digital systems in adverse conditions." Hodge moved forward like a shark sensing blood. "Colonel Vance, this is the same garbage project I told you about last month. Webb here fancies himself an engineer. This is completely untested, unverified, and frankly an insult to—" "Does it work?" Vance cut him off, her eyes locked on Marcus. "Yes, ma'am. I have tested it extensively. I can prove it right now if you give me a crew and a howitzer." The desert seemed to hold its breath again. Vance looked at the failed digital system, then at the crude-looking device in Marcus's hands, then back at his face. She was calculating odds, weighing risks, making the kind of decision that could end a career or save one. If this is watching your journey so far, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next changed everything. You have one shot, Sergeant Webb. Literally. Vance pointed at the firing line. "You miss, and I will personally ensure you spend the rest of your career cleaning latrines in Alaska." "Understood?" "Understood, ma'am." Marcus moved to the firing line with the kind of calm that comes from absolute certainty. Behind him, he heard the scramble of boots as everyone repositioned to watch. The howitzer crew looked at him with a mixture of confusion and curiosity as he approached their M777A2, its barrel still warm from the earlier failed attempts. "I need range and elevation data for all 6 bunkers. Now." A young private handed him a clipboard with the coordinates. Marcus set the wagon wheel on the hood of a nearby Humvee, his fingers moving across the calculation rings with practiced precision. He aligned the outer ring to the first bunker's distance, cross-referenced the elevation on the middle ring, adjusted for wind speed using the inner dial. The whole process took 11 seconds. Bunker 1. Range 2,847 meters. Elevation 4.2 degrees. Charge 3. Fire for effect. The gunnery sergeant looked at him like he had grown a second head. "You sure about that, Sergeant?" "Trust me." The crew loaded and adjusted. Marcus double-checked his calculations, the wagon wheel spinning slightly in his hands as he verified each number. Every eye in the compound was on him now. He could feel Hodge's glare burning into his back, could sense Vance's barely contained tension. "Fire!" The howitzer roared. The round arced through the crystalline desert air, a dark streak against the blue sky. 4 seconds of flight time that felt like 4 hours. Then the first bunker exploded in a shower of concrete and dust, the structure collapsing inward on itself with devastating precision. Direct hit. The spotter's voice cracked with disbelief. Marcus was already spinning the wagon wheel for Bunker 2. His hands moved like a concert pianist's, each adjustment flowing into the next. Range 3,201 meters. Elevation 5.7 degrees. Charge 4. The crew moved faster now, energized by success. The second round flew. Another direct hit. The bunker disintegrated. Bunker 3. Marcus called out numbers before the dust had settled from the second impact. His mind was clear, focused, operating at a level he had only achieved in his best moments. This was what he had trained for, what he had built the wagon wheel for. Not glory, not vindication, but this exact moment when lives might depend on getting it right. The third bunker exploded. Then the fourth. The crew was moving like a machine now, perfectly synchronized, every movement efficient and precise. Marcus barely looked at the wagon wheel anymore. The calculations flowed through him like water. Bunker 5. His voice was steady. Load and fire. The round screamed downrange. Impact. Destruction. One left. The final bunker sat at maximum range, partially obscured by a rocky outcrop. The hardest shot. Marcus made his calculations, rechecked them, then rechecked again. He looked at his watch. 3 minutes, 41 seconds had elapsed since the first shot. Final target. Range 4,103 meters. Elevation 6.9 degrees. Charge 5. Adjust windage 2 clicks right. Fire. The howitzer bucked. The round flew. Time seemed to stretch. Then the sixth bunker erupted into rubble. For minutes, 7 seconds. 6 bunkers. 6 hits. 0 misses. The silence that followed the final explosion was deafening. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire firing line erupted in cheers and applause. The howitzer crew surrounded Marcus, slapping his back, shouting congratulations. The young private who had handed him the coordinates was grinning so wide his face looked ready to split. Colonel Vance walked across the range with purposeful strides, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust. The anger was gone from her face, replaced by something Marcus had never seen directed at him before. Respect. She stopped directly in front of him, looking down at the wagon wheel in his hands. Sergeant Webb. That was the most impressive display of gunnery I have witnessed in 23 years of service. She picked up the device, turning it over in her hands, examining the brass rings and calibration marks. And you built this yourself? Yes, ma'am. Started 3 years ago. Refined it over time. 3 years ago. Vance's eyes narrowed. She turned to look at Hodge, who stood frozen near the equipment tent, his face ashen. Captain Hodge, did not Sergeant Webb submit a design proposal around that time? Hodge's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Ma'am, the design seemed impractical. Unvetted. I did not think. You did not think. Vance's voice could have frozen lava. You did not think that maybe, just maybe, a combat veteran with gunnery experience might know something valuable. You did not think that analog backup systems might have merit in an age of electronic warfare. You did not think at all, Captain. She handed the wagon wheel back to Marcus with something approaching reverence. Sergeant Webb, effective immediately, you are hereby attached to my staff as a technical advisor. We are going to test this device extensively, document its capabilities, and if it performs as well as what I just witnessed, we are going to manufacture it. She glanced at the failed digital system. At a fraction of the cost of that monstrosity. Ma'am, Marcus started. And one more thing. She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly. I just emailed the promotion board. My personal recommendation carries weight. You will have your E7 stripes within the month, and frankly, you should have had them years ago. The civilian contractors were gathering around now, asking to examine the wagon wheel, taking photographs, scribbling notes. One of them, a gray-haired man with MIT credentials on his lanyard, kept shaking his head in admiration. Beautiful simplicity. Elegant mathematics. Why the hell did no one show us this before? Marcus caught Hodge's eye across the compound. The captain looked like a man watching his career circle the drain. There would be an investigation. Questions about why valid innovations were suppressed. Careers would indeed end today, but not the one Hodge had intended. Sometimes the old ways are not obsolete, Vance said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sometimes they are just waiting for someone brave enough to prove their worth. Well done, Sergeant. Well done. 18 months later, Master Sergeant Marcus Webb stood in the Pentagon briefing room, watching a young lieutenant demonstrate the Mark II wagon wheel rangefinder to a room full of generals and defense contractors. The device had been refined, manufactured by a small company in Ohio, and distributed to artillery units across every branch of the military. Cost per unit, $470. Reliability rating, 99.8%. The Army had saved an estimated $230 million by integrating the wagon wheel as a backup system to digital targeting. More importantly, it had saved lives. In Syria, when an electromagnetic pulse knocked out all electronic systems during a critical firefight, our artillery unit had used the wagon wheel to provide accurate fire support that allowed 3 companies of Marines to extract safely from an ambush. Marcus had received letters from those Marines. Some he kept in his desk drawer. Some he had framed. Colonel Vance, now a brigadier general, had made good on every promise. Marcus wore the stripes of a master sergeant, taught advanced gunnery courses at Fort Sill, and consulted on weapons development projects across the Department of Defense. His garage workshop had become legendary. Other soldiers brought him problems now, innovations they had been afraid to suggest through official channels. Marcus listened to all of them. Captain Hodge had resigned his commission 8 months ago, just before the investigation into suppressed innovation recommendations concluded. The report had been damning. He worked at a car dealership in Tampa now, according to someone who had kept track. Marcus rarely thought about him anymore. The briefing ended with applause. The young lieutenant carefully packed the wagon wheel into its protective case, handling it with the reverent soldier's reserve for equipment that actually works when everything else fails. As the room cleared, General Vance approached Marcus. "Another success story." She smiled. "You know, the Navy wants to adapt your design for naval artillery now." Marcus shook his head, still amazed at how far a simple idea had traveled. "Just trying to help, ma'am." "You did more than help, Marcus. You proved something important." She gestured at the now empty briefing room. "That innovation does not always come from think tanks and defense contractors. Sometimes it comes from a sergeant in a garage who refuses to accept that the old ways are wrong just because they are old." His phone buzzed. A text from his wife. Their daughter had been accepted to MIT's engineering program. Full scholarship. She wanted to design systems that soldiers could rely on, just like her dad. Marcus looked around the Pentagon briefing room one last time, thinking about that scorching day in Nevada when everything changed. When he chose to step forward instead of staying silent. When one man with a simple idea proved that sometimes the best technology is the one that works when everything else fails. Thank you all for watching this story until the end. If it inspired you, hit that like button and leave a comment telling us what you thought. Subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories of courage and innovation. And if you have suggestions for our next video, drop them below. We read every single one. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest innovations come from the most unexpected places.